Okay, welcome to the Developing an ISO 45001 Occupational Health and Safety Management System webinar. Appreciate you guys signing up, and definitely appreciate with all that's going on that you made time to listen to the program. Again, the goal of this program is to briefly run through how the ISO 45001 standard was developed and overview of the requirements. But again, most companies with what I'll call good, robust safety programs will not have to do a lot of extra work to get certified. And as we go through the requirements, what I'd like to do is kind of point out some of the areas where if you've got a good safety program, you're OSHA compliant, you do incident investigation, you've got some metrics set up that your management team reviews periodically. You've got a pretty good program already. Overlaying the ISO 45001 standard requirements will be pretty easy, especially if you're already ISO 14000 certified or IATF or ISO 9001. It's a lot of the same concepts and same verbiage. So again, I would really encourage, as we go through these wonderful slides, for you guys to chat in questions or comments. I would really be appreciated, because when I answer your question, I'm likely answering a question that other people have. So again, we'll go with the old adage that there are no dumb questions, right? Just keep them coming. And don't wait for the end to ask them. Just ask them as we go through the presentation. So we're going to just take a look a little bit at an overview of the development process, what the standard requires, and how to get started. And if you're already OHSAS 18001 certified, you're kind of in a 3-year transition that requires you to update your program to the new standard requirements. And you should have received an email with the PDF of these slides. I sent that so that you could print them and take notes if that's what you like to do. If you didn't get the email with the PDF, send me an email afterwards, and I'll do that. A real quick snippet on us, Manager Strategies. We are focused, 90% on management systems and environmental and safety compliance programs. And that's a bulk of the consulting that we do. Our bread and butter work is we do internal audits. We help implement programs. We do internal auditor training, RCRA and DOT training. And last year I helped probably 6 sites implement the 45001 standard. And we had offered this particular training about a year or so ago. We've learned a lot going through the certification process and building these systems. So hopefully we can impart again some of those things that we've learned over the last year or so. Again, our Quick Start program is probably our most comprehensive program, really from A to Z, training your team, coming up with an action plan, training the management staff, procedures, and so forth. Most of you guys won't need that level of help, though. I hate to say that. I wish you were. I wish you did. There may be a few places in the process you may need to reach out to us and get some help, but I think a lot of you guys, because of your experience with both the ISO programs, your existing safety programs, a bulk of this, I think you guys can implement on your own. Okay, we're trying to switch slides. Again, over time here, there's been a number of different occupational health and safety standards and criteria. The ISO people kind of ignored it for quite a while. I don't know what, for whatever reason, they didn't want to jump in. So there was a bunch of folks that built a consensus standard, the OHSAS 18001 standard. ANSI in the U.S. built out the Z10 standard. The UN had the labor operators standard. So the concept of a management system for health and safety is not a new concept. Economics, it makes sense. Even organizations that have good safety programs will benefit from certification. And some companies will argue, no, we won't. But I think it's the same thing that a lot of companies saw with their environmental programs. That the certification process drove them to implement improvements, drive improvements in performance and cost reductions. And I think we're going to see the same thing with this standard. So yeah, safety costs money. I hate to put a number on a death, but somebody did. We're all worth $4.5 million. Injuries, possible injury. There's just a lot of costs associated with safety issues. Most of you that work in safety programs know that if an employee even thinks they got hurt, you start a comp case, you got to administer it, and it costs you some money. Again, we've wanted to be in compliance, so a lot of you have good OSHA programs. Then the organization started to implement a lot of injury prevention programs, incident investigations, metrics, and so forth. Now we're pushing up into more of a plan, do, check, act management process with the ultimate goal to develop what they call a safety culture. Again, I've worked with a lot of world-class companies that take safety seriously, and they indeed have a safety culture. And it just amazes me how that translates into companies being better run. I mean, the most successful companies out there have extremely efficient safety programs. Yes, Alex, there is. Let me take a small break here. Yes, you can call in. Okay, and let me grab that. Let me grab that phone number. Excuse my break here, but if I can get Alex invited, I'd like to do that. Okay, so I go to details. So Alex, I'm going to okay, so Alex, there's the phone number, and here is the PIN number. Okay, so Alex, there's a phone number and there's a PIN number. Okay, so again, it just amazes me how some companies don't want to dump or spend money to set up meetings to communicate, that they don't want to have effective safety committees, that they don't want to take the time to keep their employees safe, but yet, and they do that because they feel like it takes time away from production. It costs too much money. But the people that take the time to implement these tools have the best run and most profitable companies out there. And I'd like to say that 1,000 times. because some people just don't believe it. When you look at the difference between a compliance-based, or what I'll call an OSHA program versus a management program, plan, do, check, act program, is OSHA tends to be compliance-focused versus performance-focused. A lot of OSHA programs tend to be very reactive versus proactive, very task-oriented versus process-oriented, and it's a top-down system with OSHA. With a management system, it's ground floor up. There's a lot more opportunities for worker participation. OSHA programs tend to be driven by enforcement and very punitive, versus management systems trying to be more of a culture-based, behavior-based process. And the OSHA programs tend to focus on lagging indicators versus the use of leading indicators. And that's where you're going to get a bulk of your improvement is by developing a better leading indicator for your safety program. So again, here's just kind of the development of the standards. 14,000 came out in 96. The original 18,001 came out in 99, and 45,001 ISO standard came out in 2018. And I'm really hoping that the ISO certification will start to take on a little bit more momentum with organizations, because I really believe there's a lot of value to this certification. And when you look at what's in the ISO 45,001 standards, it's basically all the same stuff that you would have had with OHSAS 18,001, the ANSI Z10 standard. All those basic elements are in this standard. You just have to kind of figure out where they are and how to map those into the process. So if you're already certified or had developed systems along these lines, it should be very easy to migrate to the 45,000 standard. Again, ISO 45,001 is just like ISO 14,001 and 9,001. They formatted it in the same 10 sections, along with what they call this new Annex SL format. And again, what this is doing is making things extremely easy to integrate with your business system. A lot of the same terminology when it talks about intended outcomes, interested parties, risk and opportunities. Those same terms apply to the safety element as the environmental element, as the quality element of your management systems. And again, I'm going to really encourage companies to integrate these safety elements into what they're already doing, and doing it very effectively. Again, I've got this complete matrix if you're interested in it. So if you're interested in it, send me an email that compares element by element all three of these standards. And then I think in the red text it highlights what's special to the safety standard. So if you're interested in the whole matrix, let me know. But the message here is this is easy to integrate. Very easy to integrate, both from a documentation perspective as well as a management perspective. I still work with some clients that have silos, and they have a quality system separate from their environmental system, separate from their safety system. But that's not really the intent, and I hope moving forward that organizations continue to integrate these requirements. The ISO 31,000 standard, I put this in here just to remind you it's there. There's a complete standard on how to manage risk. And this is not safety risk. This is risk, whether it's financial risk, environmental risk, safety risk, risk to your reputation. It's a complete process on how to manage risk. And I encourage companies to at least take a look at this guidance document. It's got a lot of neat tools and concepts that take risk analysis to the next level. Okay, and when it talks about risk, what are the types of risk out there? You've got hazard risk, again, risk related to safety and injury and property damage and natural disasters. Financial risk, operational risk, strategic risk, risk to your reputation. If you want to hurt the reputation of your company, nothing will do it quicker than having a fatality or a serious injury at your facility. That's going to impact the reputation of you as an employer, with your employees of wanting to work there. Again, and this is what your owners and shareholders care about. What is the risk to their brand? And then compliance risk. Again, you got OSHA compliance, EPA compliance. You've got requirements from other interested parties. There's a lot of risk to being in or out of compliance, and that's one of the goals of this standard is to minimize and mitigate risk. Okay, so that's kind of we got to be believers. And if we believe the process is going to be effective and streamlined and efficient and value added, it will be. I always say there are two kinds of systems that get certified. There are effective systems that get certified, and there are ineffective systems that get certified. So just being certified does not ensure the effectiveness of your program. So keep that in mind. And the goal here, at least for me and the clients I work with, is meeting the requirements is streamlined and effectively as you can, and tools that drive improved performance. And if you can accomplish those things in your implementation process, you too can have an effective program. So again, the same with the other standards. The requirements start in section 4, this section on context, 5 leadership, 6 planning, 7 support. Same sections in your quality system as well as your environmental system. Just going to be different stuff in them. In some areas, it'll be the same stuff because there is a lot of overlap between safety and environmental. Again, plan, do, check, act. Trying to understand the impacts of external and internal pressures on your site, understanding how they affect the ability to achieve the intended outcomes of your program, and how the management system kind of plans and correlates to activities that help meet these intended outcomes. Again, the minimal intended outcomes we're looking to achieve are basically to improve our safety performance, to meet our legal and other requirements, and to achieve the established safety objectives. So when someone asks, what are the intended outcomes of your safety program? These are the 3 minimum intended outcomes. Much like your other programs, we've got to train our management teams how to answer the questions the auditors will ask. So probably one of the biggest things to implementing an ISO system is to get management teams to understand how the ISO terms apply to their safety program. Because I can ask a plant manager about his continual improvement for quality, his quality objectives, how he complies with his customer requirements, and he will tell me. He should be able to do the exact same thing for environmental and safety, and that's the goal. So when you think about implementing the process, one big part of implementation is to get the management, both from the top management to your supervisory staff, educated in some of this terminology. Again, with the first section, you've done it with environmental. We understand who we are, what the external, internal influences are. There's a big focus on workers and interested parties in this standard. They really want to see workers, and this is non-managerial staff, participating in the program. And we'll talk a little bit about where that needs to be. Our scope, and then we need to develop a system. Again, you've done this already with your quality and environmental systems. Simply integrate what you've done into this to include the safety elements of your business. So when you think of your contacts, you think of your unions, your stockholders, OSHA, the community, any internal or external influence that can impact your safety program. And again, the standard doesn't require this to be documented, but I've seen in some organizations some very simple ways to document some of this information so that it makes it easier for the management teams to understand how it applies to their sites, and then on an ongoing basis keeps management able to answer questions relative to contacts as they come up during your external audits. Have any of you guys had problems with that during either your environmental or your quality audits, where the auditor starts to ask questions about contacts and so forth, and management kind of struggles to answer those questions? If you have, if you don't mind chatting that in, I'd appreciate it. Gives me a chance to drink my coffee. Okay, if you can think of these, chat them in. I'm looking for some help here. Okay, under the leadership element, again, this is an element that I personally love as an auditor, because it means that I can push management and leadership on their understanding of the program. It says top management shall ensure leadership, commitment, and accountability for your safety program, and they need to tell me how they do that. What that means is, basically they need to understand it. Your policy, again, I don't have a real strong belief one way or another whether you should have a integrated policy with environmental, or have a separate safety policy. A lot of companies choose to integrate it with environmental. Other companies keep it separate. You can decide how to do that. The one element that's a big one here is consultation and participation. Okay, so Nawad says we've got a strong echo. Is there anybody else that hears a strong echo? If you do hear a strong echo, let me know so I know whether it's my end or his end. So if you're hearing a strong echo, please let me know. Okay, so no echo for Lynn. Jennifer's got an echo. Oh, geez, this is not good. When I hear more than one echo, that means... So I got 50% of the people with an echo. Let me try something here. Okay, Nawad, is that any better? It comes and it goes. I'm playing with what I think is a audio gain button here. So, okay. How are we doing on the echo? It comes and it goes. Okay. Well, I'm going to continue, but if it's predominantly with an echo, let me know, please. I've lowered the gain, which I'm not even sure what that means, but sometimes that has an effect on the quality. But again, I appreciate you letting me know as we do this, because I don't want something to come up and then be done. So, okay, thanks, Nawad. So 5.4, consultation and participation. Again, this is a major element change that you'll need to implement when you implement the program. If you've got a good safety committee, that's a good place to start, but we'll talk about that in a second. So again, they've got to demonstrate leadership, commitment, accountability. You've got some basic things that have to be included in your policy, including the commitment to consultation and participation of workers. So that statement needs to be in management's a policy. Okay, so there's two terms here, consultation and participation. So consultation is where we seek the views of employees before we make a decision. Participation is where we involve the employees in the decision-making process. So in both of these areas, you're going to need better documentation of how you do these things. And you'll hear me talk a lot about a safety committee. So hopefully you've got an established safety committee, because that is a requirement of the standard. And how you set it up it's up to you. But the best companies have safety committees established for each shift of operation. The safety committee is a mix of management, supervisory, hourly staff, and they meet monthly to discuss health and safety issues. But you'll probably have to take a look at the structure of those meetings and add a few things just so that you've got better evidence of how some of these things are covered. So for instance, when you establish and implement your safety policy, how would you provide evidence that you consulted with your employees? Well, how I would do it is I would present it during one of my health and safety committee meetings, circulate it in the meeting, ask the employees, do you have any input on our policy? Document that in the meeting notes and consider it done. The same with setting objectives. Present the objectives during a town hall meeting, present them during a health and safety committee meeting, ask for feedback, and then document the feedback. So that's one of the best ways to demonstrate consultation, is through a well-structured, robust, defined safety committee process. Now, when it comes to participation, we're going to have to put our thinking hats on a little bit better here. Participation. Okay, first of all, we're gonna let them give us some input in how we allow for participation. Well, figure that one out. We need to be able to demonstrate that we have participation in the identification of hazards and assessing risk. So if you're an organization where you've got job hazard assessments for all your main production processes, those were probably done by your safety person and or somebody in that department. But can you clearly demonstrate that you had participation in the identification of the hazards and assessing the risk? Can you demonstrate that you had hourly folks involved in having them review the JHA or JSA, whichever you call it? So again, you may have a lot of good documentation here, but you've got to be able to demonstrate that there was some participation. The other big one here is in incident investigations. You need to clearly have employee participation in the investigation of and corrective action of incidents. Now, most companies do a very good job with the actual employee that's hurt. They're involved, their supervisor's involved, but you're going to have to look for ways to get other people involved in the incident investigation process. So again, take a look at that, and that'll be one of these areas that your auditors will audit quite heavily. And any questions on consultation and participation, how this applies to your safety committees or anything that you're doing already? Okay, well, if they come up, let us know. Again, I think I probably said most of this. The big key steps here: set up a robust safety committee process. Consider some kind of a behavior-based safety observation process. That really, A, these programs are effective, and B, it checks a lot of the boxes. Set up a cross-functional investigation team process, and that may be prioritized based on the level of incident. Like you may have a process where all OSHA recordable incidents require an investigation team, where non-recordable incidents don't, but somehow establish the criteria for when to establish this incident investigation team. Look for opportunities to integrate the safety topics into your regular communications process, and consider setting performance goals for managers and supervisors, i.e., demonstrate that they're accountable for their safety performance. And I would say probably 10% of the companies that I get to, the managers and supervisory staff have safety metrics for their performance. So I would encourage that. Again, same as environmental, section 6 is the big deal section. This is a risk-based process. When you get done with this process, you should be able to clearly articulate to me what are the high-risk activities in our operation. Where are you choosing to focus risk reduction programs or projects? How are you doing this? Again, I just did a big audit at a big steel foundry, 1,000 people, 3 million square feet under roof, 8 or 10 buildings. And I said, well, if I walk into that building, what are the high-risk activities? And they said, well, we can't tell you that. I said, why not? Well, we've done risk assessments on all of our SOPs, and every SOP has a risk assessment. And if you wanted to know the risk for an SOP, then we could show it to you. But you can't. They couldn't tell me in that building what are the top 3 highest hazards in that building. That to me is a failure. But they got certified because the standard doesn't require that. So again, just a very good example of how you can meet requirements without really being completely effective. So when it talks about risk, it talks about the risk related to hazards, the risk related to your compliance obligations, and any other risk relative to your contacts and scope. So it's not all about the risk relative to a hazard. So just keep that in mind. Let me look at something here real quick. Okay. The same thing with the environmental program. You have to identify your legal requirements. You have to plan actions and set objectives. Again, when I'm working with organizations, if your only objective is to reduce your frequency rate, well, I guess that's your objective. But I like to tie the objectives back to more risk reduction type projects that you've got planned. So again, to take a look at how you establish your safety objectives. It's okay to tie them to your frequency rate, even though that's really more of a lagging indicator. But take a look at other more creative ways to set objectives that will drive risk reduction. The same as with your environmental program, your hazard identification and risk assessment process is the big deal part of this standard. Even if you've got JSAs or JHAs done for your major processes, there are specific hazards that they don't cover. They don't cover assessing the hazards relative to we'll say bullying, sexual harassment, employee travel, those types of hazards. And the standard says you must identify hazards. The process must be ongoing and proactive. It's got to cover workers, contractors, visitors. It's got to include potential emergencies. And if you look at the standard itself under 612, there's a section on hazard identification and another section on risk assessment. So once you identify a hazard, you're then obligated to assess the risk. And how you choose to document that is completely up to you, the organization. Again, a good starting point with your major processes on the floor would be your standard job hazard assessments. But again, don't take for granted everyone's got those set up already. In the bigger companies I work with, I do a lot of work with Magna, with Lear. They've been doing JHAs forever. I get to some smaller companies, I say JHA, they say, what's that mean? So if you've got that work started, you're a long ways toward being ready for certification. So again, it's not only risk to our employees. That's the easy part. But how about risk to vendors that come in and service us? How about risk to our contractors, visitors? How about risk to people in proximity to our plant? So if you have a high volume operation, you have a large volume of truck traffic, how does that truck traffic influence the safety of people in proximity to your business? If you're next to a refinery or a propane storage facility, how does that hazard affect or potentially impact the safety of your staff? So again, you'll know that those things haven't been assessed under your JHA process. There's some pretty easy ways to do this, but again, when it comes to implementing this management system process, this tends to be one of the biggest deals, is the documentation and risk assessment of the hazards. And again, how you assess the risk is up to you. Most companies are going to look at a standard FEMA risk assessment process. Look at the consequence of the hazard versus the likelihood. You'll get into this concept of what's called risk tolerance. How much risk can an organization tolerate? And then once you've measured the risk, how do you measure the reduction of risk? And that's where you want to put some thought into what you establish as the original risk of some activities, and then over time, how you might be able to demonstrate that these risks are being reduced. And here's again a pretty standard risk assessment form. It might look a lot like a JSA, JHA. Just look at the type of risk. How do you control it? What the risk is, if you need to implement any additional controls, and then what the final risk analysis is. So a lot of organizations will look at their existing control measures, assess risk. If they see anything that pops up into the red area, they'll say, okay, well, we need additional controls to reduce that risk, and then show that the resulting risk is either low, medium, or other levels. And then over time, if you add additional controls to reduce risk, this is a good place to document these risk reduction projects. Okay, so what the standard says is that you'll identify hazards. Now, and the process needs to be proactive and ongoing. it leaves it up to the organization to do this. It doesn't ask an auditor. It doesn't ask your neighbors. It's up to you to identify the hazard. Once you've identified the hazard, then you need to assess the risk. Is it low, medium, high? Is there a number that you put to it? And what the standard requires is that that risk criteria is documented. The risk assessment process is documented. So let's just say, as an organization, I have a visitor policy, and it identifies hazards to visitors. That's fine. Now, how do we assess the risk? That might be the piece of the documentation that you have to further implement. Okay. Again, legal and other. This is the same as with their environmental program. Identify which either federal or state OSHA programs apply to us. Any requirements from local emergency responders or local communities as far as emergency response. Any requirements from either our workers or union agreements. Do we have any neighborhood or community ordinances that we have to deal with? And then do we have any specific customer requirements? Again, Section 7 deals with support. Exact same as environmental and quality. 7.1 says we're going to have resources. 7.2 says we're going to have competent personnel. We're going to train people in hazard communications. We're going to have forklift drivers trained. We're going to do PPE training. It's all that OSHA-based training you're already doing, as well as some. And you probably have to add a few slides to your new employee orientation to expand some awareness that we talk about the ISO standard. 7.4 talks about our communication process. I believe it requires us to be much more proactive. Not only do we communicate, but how often and what are we going to communicate? A lot of organizations have communication calendars. They give out topics once a month to their supervisors. They say cover that topic during your shift handoff meetings, and they provide evidence of that. But I think, again, successful companies communicate. Period. They communicate regularly. They communicate about quality, finances, environmental, and safety issues. That makes a company more successful. Some organizations still struggle to see the value of communication. So I hope that going through this process pushes those organizations to become more proactive. Documentation, again, we got to have it. It's got to be controlled. There's nothing new there. Operational controls and planning, just like for environmental, we have to control our risk, the hazards. We have to have controls for our compliance obligations. Those are the things we have to control. We need to have a process to eliminate hazards. We need to be able to demonstrate how we apply the hierarchy of controls to our determination of controls. So all the way from removing the hazard to PPE being the last line of defense. We need to have finally, we've got a requirement for management of change. Take a look at how you guys manage change. My suggestion is to take a look at the 6 ways you manage change. You guys have engineering change notices for your quality system. You guys have new chemical approval processes for new chemicals. You have management review meetings to talk about changes. So within all of those processes, validate that you can document the implementation of that change to the safety system. So that'll probably require you guys to improve the documentation of how safety is considered during change processes. Again, that's going to be one of those areas that auditors focus on, because we're nice guys and we like to focus on your weak points. So look at how you guys manage change, how you consider the safety and risk relative to those changes. Procurement, again, you're buying chemicals, okay, because we got to have an or not MSD, we got to have an SDS sheet. We get it. We hire contractors, we get their insurance, we look at their safety program, we give them our safety rules. If we outsource processes, we apply some level of control or influence to our outsourced processing. And then emergency response. Again, this is the same as environmental. We have to identify potential safety emergencies. Injuries. If we work at heights with harnesses, what if we have to do an at-heights rescue? If you work in confined spaces, how do we do a confined space rescue? So, do we have on-site CPR and first aid trained personnel? How do we access emergency response resources? Those should be all pretty well laid out already if you got a good OSHA program. Again, when it talks about hierarchy controls, how do we consider the hierarchy controls when we establish the controls? So I'm at a foundry and I see a guy has got a cup on the end of a steel stick. He's got a full headgear, flammable material outfit on. He's reaching into a metal pour to take a sample of the molten metal. And he's being sprayed with sparks. And I asked the client, I said, is that the way he's supposed to do that? He says, yep, that's our process. And I said, well, it looks like it could be better because it doesn't look real safe to me. So PPE is the last line of defense. So you need to be able to demonstrate how you've considered, can the hazard be eliminated? Can we substitute a less toxic chemical for a really toxic chemical? Can we isolate people using an engineering control? Can we define a work practice or a work instruction that minimizes the hazard? And then finally, what is the required PPE for that job? So this is something that we need to be able to demonstrate through our system. Management of change, again, I've already talked a little bit about this. Anytime that our work surroundings changes, how we organize the work, new equipment, new processes, plan expansions, a new legal requirement. Again, some methodology for evaluating these changes and making sure that we've considered them in our safety program. Procurement, again, the big deal here is contractors. How do we vet our contractors? The most successful companies out there ask their contractors before they're approved about their safety programs. They want to work with contractors with robust safety programs. If you're not asking that question today, that might be something you guys can consider. Emergency response, again, I'm not going to talk a lot about this, but you should have a pretty good emergency response process already for your basic, in medical injuries. Where some companies might be a little weak is if you do work at heights or you do confined space entries, do you have working at height or confined space entry response plans? If you don't, add those to what you already have. Performance evaluations. Again, we've got to measure our performance, both effectiveness and performance. We've got to do some internal audits and management review, much like we already do with our environmental and equality programs. Yeah. So again, most of you will have to establish an internal audit program for your safety management processes. And this is one area where it gets a little bit conflicting between what's a management system audit versus what's a compliance audit. Because most companies have pretty decent either compliance inspections. I mean, maybe you do a monthly inspection for things. A lot of things focused on monitoring compliance. So we'll need to take a look at how those things get viewed versus what auditing the management system elements kind of look like. And then management review is the same thing. There's certain inputs that we have to cover with management, certain outputs. Again, the best practice is that we do an annual review at the conclusion of a year, do a full review, and then on a monthly basis, look at the key elements. Whether it's looking at the metrics, the objectives, incident results, however you want to do that on a monthly basis. But it's still a good practice to do an annual full system review. It's from my perspective, it's easier to audit. But B, I think it's important for management in one setting to look at a safety program and say, well, how did we do last year? What worked, what didn't work? And this is one of these areas where I believe it makes sense to keep things separate. I know everyone's pushing integration, especially the monthly reviews, integrated, quality, health, environmental safety, do that all in one meeting. But when you do an annual review, I think it makes sense to split these up a little bit, to do a full quality system review, a full environmental review, and a full safety review. And then at a minimum, a full EHS review if you're going to combine two of them. But again, I think that's the best practice. Do I have a sample audit schedule and management review template? I think I do. Yes. If you want something like that, send me an email. I'll send you what I got. Now there's this big thing. Do we want to measure our leading indicators and lagging indicators? Okay, organizations have gotten very good at tracking lagging indicators. They know their recordables. They know their frequency rate. They know their lost days. They know their comp cost. Those are measurements after the injury has occurred. What you want to take a look at is how do we set up and establish leading indicators. Again, things that we can measure that would detect problems before the injury occurs. And people even consider near miss reporting more of a lagging indicator. But take a look at the most effective thing is any kind of an employee suggestion or risk-based observation program where you've got employees reporting hazardous conditions before an injury occurs. That is an excellent leading indicator. When you do your inspections, monthly safety inspections, how many findings do we have each month? That can be a great leading indicator. Safety training, what percentage of our safety training is getting done? That's a great leading indicator. So this is one area where organizations, again, the best companies I deal with, they have world-class safety programs, have behavior-based safety programs. They tell employees that you must do 2 observations a month, and these get reported and analyzed. Okay, that occurs in probably less than 10% of the companies that I audit, but it is so effective. So Valerie says we are ISO 14,000 and 9,000 have combined these programs. Could we add 45,000 to that and combine all three? Absolutely, yes. That's the name of the game. And that's why I'm saying if you guys are ISO 9014 already, you're kind of running me out of business because you don't need a lot of help. Now, there are a few places where we can help, but if you've already got these programs started up, let's just add the safety stuff to it and let it go. Improvement. Again, we have to identify opportunities to improve, plan those actions, and achieve those actions. We have to try to enhance our performance metrics. That's a big deal. They combine the incident investigation and nonconformity processes in 10.2. So you have to take a look at incident reporting, take a look at your corrective action process. And one of the biggest problems with how companies do this is they set up a system that, I can't think of the word, but causes people to not want to report minor injuries. So if you've got a 3-page incident investigation form, people are not going to report first aid injuries. And the number of first aid injuries you have and what they are, that is direct feedback to your program and can drive continuous improvement. But a lot of companies don't even track them because they think it's too big a pain in the behind. So you want to build the incident investigation process to have incident reporting and investigation requisite to the injury or the hazard. So you'll have one process for first aid injuries, another process for non-medical injuries, non-recordable injuries, and then another process for recordable injuries. And make sure that the effort it takes to report and investigate those is easy enough that it encourages people to do it. Because when you get into an organization that has 2 recordables a year, tracking those 2 recordables tells you nothing. Sure, you're going to investigate them. Sure, it's a big deal. Okay, but it's that non-recordable injury that's going to give you the feedback. It's that number of first aid injuries. Okay, that's where you're going to start to get feedback. Once you get to be good enough to where you don't have a lot of recordable injuries, you got to focus on the lower tier injuries to investigate things that get you better. In case you can't tell, this is one of these things that annoys me a little bit. But anyways, I think there's a ton of value here. I'm running a little bit late here. I'm not going to talk a lot about OHSAS to 45,000. If you have questions on these slides, read them, and because most of you guys out there are not OHSAS certified anyways. Benefits, again, this can be a way to make your system better. Even organizations that think they've got a stellar OSHA-based program, this process will make your system better. It will push you toward having a safety culture. I can't say enough about, this you might have to lay out some money. Obviously, you've got to pay certification costs. You've got some internal labor costs. You may reach out for a little bit of consulting support, but the investment's going to be really worthwhile. And if any of you need for me to sit down on one of your managers' meetings and present the benefits, I can do that for you. I'm not going to say much more about that. Again, certification, again, most of you guys will go through the certification with your registration companies. They will typically want to do a stage 1 assessment. Most of those won't be more than a day. They'll come on site, they'll look at your documentation briefly, they'll look at the hazards, they'll assess your readiness. They'll say, okay, they're ready. They'll come back in about 6 weeks to do what is called a stage 2 or the certification audit. Again, depending on the size of your organizations and the complexity, that'll be anywhere from 2 to 5 days. Hopefully you'll get recommended for certification. And then you'll get into the 3-year certification cycle. It'll be certification, next year surveillance, then recertification, and the fun goes on. Different certification companies have differing abilities to do these audits integrated. So if you build a completely separate safety system, they have to do a completely separate certification audit of that system. Some registration companies offer combined environmental and safety audits, and probably even fewer would do a quality, safety, and environmental together. But those types of things would be specific to your registration company. So when you get ready to get certified, probably the first audit would be safety focused to get the 45,000 certification, but then ask them going down the road, is there any way to integrate this with environmental? But that requires you to have an integrated system. And if you have questions about that, I can help you with that. So again, there's some opportunities to reduce audit days as part of the integration process. But again, that's something that you're going to want to discuss specifically with your registration company. So again, to get started, it's really important to have management support. This has to be a management-led process, not a safety-led process. Management has to show leadership, commitment, and accountability. I would encourage you guys to establish a small cross-functional team, not only safety, production, maybe somebody from maintenance, maybe somebody from shipping and receiving. And again, even though the safety folks might drive a lot of the work, getting their buy-in is very important through the process. On the front end, establish your resource needs. Get the team started. Set a budget if you think you're going to need any on-site or off-site training for your people. If you need any external auditing, those types of things would be set up a budget. If you're part of a multi-site company, like my friends at Magna or Lear, or I saw some friends from Borg Warner show up. You big companies have it easy. You guys can cross audit and share things with each other. So look for ways to do that. Again, look for ways to integrate this with your other programs. Set a realistic schedule. When I say realistic, don't make it too short or don't make it too long. Trying to take too long is worse than trying to get it done in too little time. Because I know the cultures you guys work in, if it's not important today, it's not important. So unless you got a certification audit scheduled in 3 months and actions are needed, you may have a hard time getting people's attention. Give regular updates in management review and document those as you go through the process. And again, talk to your registration company early. It takes usually 3 or 4 months to get on their schedule. And don't be afraid to call them up and get on their schedule. I mean, if you implement some things and you got a good program, you're probably close enough to get certified, even though they might issue some minors. So don't be afraid to schedule that audit. I put this slide in here, probably says some of the steps. Okay, so some of the basic steps. Integrate the requirements for this standard into your existing systems. Next step is to set up and or improve the safety committee process. And again, if you need help with that, let us know. Then the big deal is, how do you document hazard identification and risk assessments? Either establish or improve your safety policy. Document your objectives. Think about risk reduction. Improve the documentation of your legal safety requirements. Document your safety support processes, especially communication. How do we communicate in a proactive and robust fashion. Again, you're probably doing pretty good with your controls and emergency response already. Look at them. Establish your performance metrics. Lagging, you probably already have them. Leading, you might need to work on them. You're going to need to establish your internal audit process for safety. Integrate management review process, both the annual and monthly updates. And then take a look at your incident investigation and corrective action process to ensure that you can demonstrate worker participation. So again, as I've said here, I think a lot of you guys that are already ISOized and you got good safety programs, you're not going to need a ton of safety support or consulting support. A few things we can do. The quick start, that's pretty comprehensive. If you need a lot of help, we can do that. We do have a cross-functional team training session where we come on site or remotely for a day, train your team on the standard and what it requires. We can come on site in a day. You guys might be able to figure out how to document this stuff, and it may take you a bunch of your own time. But in one day's time, we can come into your site, look at your documentation, and quickly tell you how to document this process. So that would expedite and minimize the time you'll spend. We've got some great hazard ID and risk assessment tools if needed, or if you need to look at your own tools, your JHAs, JSAs, and determine how do we meet the requirements and what do we change to make it a little bit better. We can look at that. Obviously, we can come in and do your initial internal audit or ongoing audits we do for a lot of companies. And then we do offer internal auditor training, both specific to this standard, and we have a 3-day integrated 14,000, 45,000 internal auditor class that we're now offering. It really makes no sense to do a safety system audit by itself. If somebody calls me up for that, sure, I'll do it. But most of the work that we're doing today is our integrated 14,000 and 45,000 audits. You might add another day of time onto your internal audit, but again, you can capture both standards at the same time. We are offering a comprehensive 45,001 webinar implementation, 6 hours, May 19th. This is going to give you electronic templates, electronic tools. It's going to explain to you and your implementation team how to do it, what the steps are. It's a very detailed program. If you're interested, let me know. We'll get you signed up for that. That one does cost a few dollars and cents. And we also are offering the integrated auditor training, which again, we got some dates set up in Detroit and Chicago. But any of these training sessions can be offered at your location with as few as 5 people, even 4. I've done them with 4. And then we can customize things to what you need. So if you have any need for support, it doesn't have to be the full $20,000 level of support. I mean, for a few $1,000s inside of one day, we can streamline it for you and make it more effective for your site. I'm encouraging people to subscribe to my YouTube page. I guess this is my advertisement here. And we're going to try to be posting more relevant content. This webinar I may post. I don't know if I'll post it yet, but I did post a previous version. But I'm hoping that these start to get a little bit more beneficial. And with that, that's how to get a hold of us. I definitely appreciate your time, attention. I'm glad you were able to show up today. I love to answer questions. If I can make your life easier, I feel good. So don't hesitate to call, email. You don't got to pay me a penny. I love to help people. If there's certain things you need for me to come in and do, I like that too. But I really enjoy helping people, and I really enjoy making people's life easier. I know where you guys are at. You don't have enough time or resource to get your jobs done. You've got management pushing these expectations on you. You need help. I can feel your pain when I'm either auditing you or helping through consulting. I find a lot of personal enjoyment in that. So with that being said, don't hesitate to email me questions. If I've got some stuff I can share with you, I will. If I think you're asking me for too much because I need to get paid for it, I'll tell you that too. But again, at the end of the day, I really enjoy helping people and hope we can help you guys out. Again, if you have any specific questions, give me an email. Go ahead and shoot me an email. I can shoot you the webinar pricing and all the other stuff. So again, thank you very much. I appreciate your time today. If you have any more questions, you can